Moonshine Jesus, no eye in the sky. Moonshine Jesus, baby, alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Hello and welcome to the Moonshine Jesus Show. We are glad you are tuning in with us. We are brought to you by ProgressiveChristianity.org. We encourage you to go check them out. We also encourage you to check us out on social media over on Facebook. Just look for the Moonshine Jesus Show. A few quick notes. This, as always, will not be a spoiler-free podcast at all.
Mm-hmm.
And we will be doing a Q&A at the very end. So as we're going along, please feel free to leave your questions in any comment section, and we will try to get to as many as we can. More importantly, I am joined, as always, by my good buddy Caleb. How are you, sir?
I am doing fantastic. How are you doing today, Mark?
Doing great, and I'm looking forward to getting into this movie. But first, I'd really like to know if you have an appropriately themed drink.
Well, I've got a themed drink, and you can tell me if it's appropriately themed or not. So we're talking about the Adam Project today.
Absolutely.
Which is all about time travel.
Time travel, yes.
And so I've got a sonic screwdriver here. It's a nice shade of green. It looks kind of like some kind of fuel you would use for a
really
time
does
machine.
Like uranium fuel or something like you see in comic books or something.
But it really tastes pretty good. It's orange juice and blue curacao and vodka, and the orange juice takes most of the taste, so it's real easy to drink. How about you, Mark? What are you drinking?
Well, I have also mixed up a drink here, and this one is called, I followed your suit, the Time Traveler. It's something put together by a distillery called Ghost Coast. It has bourbon, maraschino liqueur, and it also has chartreuse in it, a little chocolate bitters, and then a nice piece of lemon for zest. So I haven't yet put my bitters in, so I'm going to do that now, and then we can cheers and enjoy our drinks together.
Good. Sir? I saw that, Mark. I thought that sounds like a trip to the liquor store when I saw that.
And
it was like an expensive trip to the liquor store.
It wasn't just a trip to the liquor store. I didn't have any chocolate bitters, and it took 3 stores to find them.
But how is it?
It is crazy good. I'm so glad I did this. It is. I'm not even kidding. It's delicious. How about you?
Mine's good. Yeah,
of course it is. All right, sir. Cheers to the show. Let's get into this after this break.
All right.
Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show, where today we are talking about the Adam Project. The Adam Project is on Netflix, and it's a movie that is all about Adam Reed, portrayed in his older form by Ryan Reynolds from 2050, who goes back in time to this ancient time of 2022.
So far back.
It's so far back. Can you all even imagine? 2022. And he teams up with a younger version of himself, a 12-year-old, to try and save his future wife, Zoe Saldana, and to stop his father, Mark Ruffalo, from inventing time travel. And I have a very important question for you, Mark, as we're getting started today.
Okay. All right. I think I'm ready for it.
Okay. I want to know, this movie stars Ryan Reynolds.
Yes.
Have you ever seen a movie starring Ryan Reynolds where he's not just playing Ryan Reynolds. Have you ever seen a movie where he's not just playing himself?
No, and I think part of that is that's the only way he gets cast. Like I think this movie, we see little moments of him wanting to be more than the snarky, quick-witted, geeky, nice-looking dude. You know what I mean? Like we see these little moments where he lets go of the snark, and he gets in. I feel like that's who he really wants to be, but he knows to get these big contracts, he's got to pitch it as Ryan Reynolds, right?
That's right. Yeah, you're right. He's got to be snarky, and but it was such a fun movie to watch because of that, and especially, two clergy folks on Easter night. I don't know when you watched it, but I watched it last night after all the Holy Week stuff, and this was the exact kind of movie I wanted to watch.
Yeah, exactly.
Just fun and funny and all that.
Yeah, it's easy. It doesn't even. I mean, it's a quote time travel movie, but the reality is it doesn't go that deep. I mean, yes, that's part of the storyline in the fact that it starts in 2050 and it goes back to 2022 ultimately, and then even though we're trying to go back to 2018 or 2018.
2018.
But they don't even actually try to mess with like what time travel really is and how does it really work. Matter of fact, the one time that his younger self asked the question about it, he just kind of he's like, oh, you did all of this, you risked the breaking the space-time continuum just so you could get back to this woman, and instead of starting to explain how all of that works, he was like, but wait till you meet her. It's
right.
just like a little joke, and then they move on. They don't even bother. Let's not mess too much with the science geeky stuff. We don't need to do that. Which I think, to your point, it just made it such a fun. Like you didn't have to get overly engaged, and yet it was engaging and it was fun.
It was,
and it had a lot of good stories, morals, kind of stuck in there with it. Trying to teach us a few little things.
It did. Yeah, that's right. And isn't that the best? When you can be sitting there and it can be kind of a still moment, and then all of a sudden it's action packed, and then it's funny. And if you can get all of those in a movie, it doesn't matter if it's going to win an Oscar or not, right? We've been talking about Oscars for the past several times.
Exactly.
This one's not going to win an Oscar. No. But it was
I will say the kid that played young Adam, Walker Scoble, that kid, first time in the movies, he's up there. He's up there with the likes of Ryan Reynolds, Jennifer Gardner, Mike Ruffalo, Zoe Saldana. He's on screen with all of them, and he holds his own like a professional. He was impressive.
And he does a great Ryan Reynolds, if Ryan Reynolds were a 12-year-old.
Right. Well, it turns out that he's this massive Ryan Reynolds fan, has always been. Yeah. And the first time they get together, he's riding in the back seat of Ryan's car, and Ryan has his phone on, and Walker starts quoting Deadpool, like different Deadpools, to the letter, and he can go on for like 5 minutes quoting every line perfectly in the cadence of Ryan. Is brilliant. He, like you said, he was unreal in this.
Deadpool's the best, and it was also fun. One of the fun things for nerds like us, Mark, and this was that there were also all kinds of meta moments, and also moments where they were referencing other franchises, which was a lot of fun. Yeah, especially there was a lot of Star Wars and Back to the Future stuff.
Yeah,
when he turns off the plane, like the Millennium Falcon,
he starts cooking. He goes, "I always wanted to do this," and you go, "I know what you're doing."
Or the lightsaber, and his younger self is like, "Oh, it's a lightsaber." No, it's not a lightsaber, and he pulls it out. Yeah, it's a lightsaber. So it was really fun to nerd out on it too. But you're right, there were a lot of significant moments, and especially one of the things that struck me was grief. The theme of grief.
I mean, the whole movie ultimately is around the theme of grief. I mean, the only reason he's wanting to risk breaking the time barrier and the time continuum is because of grief. He lost
Right.
he lost his wife, and he couldn't bear with it. He was like, I got to change this. I got to fix this. And then he goes back to see his younger self, who's just recently grieving the loss of his dad. And you see mom trying to take care of her son as she grieves the loss of a husband. I mean, it's definitely, and how each person manages and deals with those becomes really important in all of this. And you see the older Adam working a little bit with the younger one. And one of my favorite lines is when he's talking to him about the way he treats his mom, because he's very snarky with his mom and short with his mom, and she handles it amazingly. But when the older Adam says to the younger one, she wakes up every morning with a broken heart and a closet full of his clothes and gets nothing from you but a fistful of crap and not even like 10 seconds of genuine empathy. I mean, that was one of those moments where you just kind of exhaled and went, exactly.
Right.
What about some empathy? What about some empathy? And it had so many of those moments.
It did, and they were kind of unexpected, because at times it was so lighthearted, and then at times they were shooting at future soldiers and stuff, and then you have these poignant moments where it's reflecting on the human condition in ways that were unexpected for me. And as they're talking about grief, one of the other lines that hit me, Mark, was that he's angry. He's angry, right?
I love this line.
Yeah, it's great. So the older self, he's so mad at his dad. He's blamed his dad for everything, and his younger self was like, "No, our dad always made time for us." And he said, "Do you think maybe it's because it's easier to be angry than to be sad?" And that line so resonated with me. Because isn't that an easier emotion to feel, anger?
It is, and we see that. I mean, we see that in our friends and other folks all the time, where you do realize that the anger that they're expressing really is just masking sadness, but just that perspective that it's easier to be angry than sad, kind of, for me, reposition. I've always understood this relationship between anger and sadness. Like that frequently someone's anger is really a masked sadness. But to hear it said that it's easier to be angry than sad kind of helped me get a little deeper hold on my personal understanding of the relationship between those two things. I thought it was just a brilliant line.
And in a time travel movie,
I know, right?
Ryan Reynolds, and so that to me is one of the markers of a great movie. Is when, and I don't care what the critics say. My wife always gives me a hard time. She says, "You like terrible movies, Caleb," and it's probably true. I do. I like
this movie got kind of good reviews, not some not so great reviews, but it is currently the 4th most watched movie in the history of Netflix. So the people have spoken. Like,
that's right. And you know what? Sometimes that's true. Sometimes the critics don't get it right. Sometimes, what we want to watch is powerful for a reason. And so I like movies like that. Movies that entertain us and teach us something about
absolutely life. And they teach us so much in this. There's the line when they first are introduced to Dad, and he's giving a lecture, and he goes, "Give yourself permission to be inadequate, and then then get to work. You can be good at something. You can't be good at something unless you're willing to be at it first." And I was just like, that's a lesson that takes us too much time to learn. Frequently, we believe we have to get it right every time, rather than be willing to fail so that you can learn enough to do it right. Just so many lines that had these beautiful little moments. The young Adam gets picked on as a kid. He's very smart. He's very smart and insightful in a lot of ways. We learn,
and has a mouth
as it goes on, and quite a mouth. And Ryan, the older Adam, is actually not all that insightful. He's kind of gotten kind of dumb and thick. And I love it when the younger kid says, "God, it's like I traded my brains for the muscles.
Yeah, that's the
And he goes, that's a shit deal. It's like, I
That
love
was fantastic.
that
Yep.
they bring that up. That
Uh-huh.
was brilliant. And then ultimately the
It was.
older Adam ends up recognizing, he goes, I spent some 30 years trying to get away from the me that was you. And I'll tell you what, kid, I hate to say it, but you were the best part all
Yeah.
along.
Yeah.
And that was another one of those moments where you just went, wow. That, we think about going back and
It's
what would we tell our younger self? Like, and it's always the
yeah,
things we think
right.
about are always like how to do your life better and how to avoid
Right.
this. And instead, he goes back and he ultimately says, "Look, I'm starting to realize that you were the best part of me. You were always the best part of me." Can you
Yeah.
imagine being a 12-year-old kid and having the experience of seeing your older self, idolizing how cool and strong and all of you, but he turns to you and he goes, "Turns out you were the
This
best
was
part of me
yeah.
all along." I mean,
Yeah.
how powerful is that?
Very powerful. I think one of the things that we learn in the movie that Adam sees, and that I think we really benefit from when we see in our own lives, is whenever we can accept ourselves for who we are. Whenever
Yeah.
we can just be authentically who we are, that's one of the most freeing things in the world. Whenever we're not trying to conform to who we think others want us to be, and in
In
a
a lot of
real
ways, that
way.
was go ahead. I was just
Well,
gonna
no,
say
you go.
I was just gonna
You
say in a
go.
lot I was just gonna say in a lot of ways, that's like the sub theme of this movie.
Mhm. Yeah. I like that because I was gonna say I knew
Yeah.
you were gonna tie it back to the movie because I
Go
was gonna
ahead.
tie it to church, and I
Yeah.
was gonna say
Oh.
that whenever churches are doing their jobs,
Mhm.
that this is what churches should be doing, is
Right.
encouraging people to be who they are. And whenever we recognize that wonderful diversity and we encourage people to be who they are, that's an incredible blessing to church. It's an incredible blessing to the world. So let's talk more about the world and let's talk more about church as we move into our theopolitical segment right after the drop.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus show. So Caleb, there's lots of places we can go with this. I'm going to start in a particular one. It was another quote that happened in kind of the big climactic scene where their dad and his former partner are kind of struggling with who's going to get to be in control of and decide whether or not time travel actually gets to happen and occur.
Right.
And she is more of the business type, and he's more of the idealistic type. And
Mm-hmm.
as it's all going on, and they're yelling at each other, she says to him, "You just never understood the bigger picture." And then this kind of climactic moment happens where some science kicks in and saves
Mm-hmm.
him and his kids. And he says, "You just never understood the science."
Yeah. What a
How
moment.
much of that goes on in our government where we're not making choices based on
Uh-huh.
understanding the science, but we're making choices based on the money, on the corporations who paid the right people. I mean,
Yep.
is
Which
that
is
a
it
good thing?
not?
'Cause I kind of felt like I felt like that
Uh-huh.
somebody took a lot of time working this movie just to get to those two lines as a way of saying, all right, like we need to start taking science a lot more seriously because it can
Mm-hmm.
save us.
Uh-huh.
Focusing on the money will kill us, which is what happens. The folks who are
Yep, that's
focusing on the
right.
money in the midst of a big science piece happening, they die because they kept focusing on the money. He understood the science. He survives. Is that not Don't you think that was an intentional
That's like
method?
a summary. Yeah, that's like a summary of our country, of what we've seen over the past several years.
Right.
You're absolutely right. Yeah, focusing completely on money and not on science. And so we've of course seen this, in the pandemic, as we see politicians who, in the midst of the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic, didn't
Yep.
want to believe scientists, actively denying what scientists knew to be true, spreading
100.
false information, saying, "Oh, well, we don't even know if this is a real virus or
Yeah.
whatever." Like, yeah, we do.
Right.
we absolutely 100% know it. And then as time went on, and we knew how the virus spread, and still politicians focusing only on money and power. How is
Right.
it that we can continue to accumulate our own power by, by telling people they don't need to abide by the regulations that we're finding out from the scientists,
Hmm.
trying to amass money by not encouraging people to stay at home and stuff. So just one example of the many examples where we see people not listening to science. And I love this. Is a brilliant insight, Mark. That yeah, this is
Well,
this is the
and,
height
and,
of the
and
movie, and it's what our society is doing right now.
it is exactly, and
Mhm.
it feels like, I mean, because it is at the climax
Yeah,
of the movie, and so
yeah,
it's very clear that this was a message that when they started, that they had decided this is a really good way to get
hmm
to and start talking about this particular way of understanding what we're doing. Makes me
yeah,
think all the way back to our podcast on Don't Look Up, which
hmm
was also very much about the denial of climate science and the choices we're making so that people can make money, just like in that film.
yeah,
And we do it
absolutely,
over and over again, and we talk about that, like, what we need to be doing is being out there actively protesting these things, writing our representatives, but most
hmm
importantly, during
yeah,
the election process, paying attention to who's saying what,
hmm
who's making
right,
has the right platforms and will really do something about it, because we can
yeah,
yell and shout all we want, but if we don't have
hmm
the people who are in those offices who are willing to do the right thing, um,
yeah,
they're going to, unfortunately, in the long run, they've shown, service themselves. They're going to do what's best for them,
absolutely,
and however
yeah.
they can make money and stay elected and have that job, right?
Yeah, right. And so holding people accountable after they've been elected is extremely important too, right? But not just to be out in the street or to even vote for the right person, but to do those things, and then also to hold those people accountable so that they continue to do the same things that they said they were going to do. So one of the other things that struck me
Yeah.
was that we're talking about advanced technology here,
Right.
and we're talking about a private company
Hmm.
controlling technology that affects the entire human race.
Right.
And so I was finding myself wondering, how do we ethically manage
Yeah.
advances in technology, especially those advances that are owned by private companies? I'm thinking about folks like Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, or
Oh,
even folks who own vaccines, companies that
right.
own vaccines. So you know that literally the whole human species is dependent upon these.
Right,
How do we
and there's the
manage
whole
that?
question of regulation, like,
Hmm
how heavily should the government be regulating, particularly when people are messing around with stuff that could be dangerous, that could put
Yeah.
everyone at risk. Uh, and I think that's a really particularly in a society that wants to be capitalistic, um,
hmm
and would like to show some amount of freedom to discovery, but I mean, I don't. What's the answer? What's the balance there? How much should we be regulating things that could be dangerous, and how capable? I mean, we can answer that.
hmm
Let's say that we're able to answer that question. The problem
The
is,
big if. Yeah.
yeah, if we could, even if we
Uh
could,
huh.
the
Okay.
rate that science develops at, there's someone in a lab
No
somewhere
thanks.
doing something we've never thought of and wouldn't have known to regulate. I mean,
Right.
where are we going as a society? How do we deal with that? How do we manage that? I mean, because I think we're at it. We're definitely have learned over the last, let's say, 6 years, 5 years,
hmm
that we can't trust people to do the right thing because it's the right thing.
We can't wait. Wait. What made you think that, Mark? What
Um,
examples? I can't think of a single.
Well, I was
but-
walking down the street and there's this guy wearing a red baseball cap. No, I was probably
I still can't. So I'm from Missouri. I still can't wear my St. Louis Cardinals baseball cap because it's red. The other day, like I've got crazy hair. I'm like, I'm gonna put on a hat, and I look
Right.
down at like at my hat rack. I'm like, has it been long enough since Trump has been out of
It has.
office that
I
I can wear
promise.
my St. Louis Cardinals hat?
No,
Like,
it has
no,
not.
I can't.
It just isn't yet.
It's
there
not.
are too many.
You're right. We've seen people aren't ethical.
Yeah, we've seen
Yeah,
and they're not going to think of what the greater good
Uh-huh.
is. We'll go back to COVID
Right.
and following party lines
Mhm,
rather than science.
Yeah.
So what do we do as a society, or even just as a nation? What do we do in order to
Yeah.
try to regulate that? Because I think
Yeah.
I assume you and I
Mhm.
are in some agreement that there's got to be some level of regulation to these things
Absolutely.
that could.
Yeah.
I mean, we do that with everything else. If
Yeah.
we know we have a thing that could negatively impact other people, we put regulations on it. Most things, not guns. We should be doing it with guns, but
We absolutely should be.
we should be, but those are items that could negatively impact other people that we really don't, and that gets back into the avoiding the science and the facts and
Yeah.
going political.
Yeah.
But with cars, you got to have insurance, you got to pass a test, you got to
Right.
wear a
You gotta
seatbelt,
regulate it.
like all
Mhm.
these things that protect other people. We all like it's what a healthy society does for each other.
Yeah.
I wonder if we are doing enough of that when it comes to science, particularly advanced science that starts
Yeah.
dabbling in things that have a larger impact than one individual.
Yeah. I think so. I think at the heart of this, in some ways, it's kind of reactionary after we've
Yeah.
seen the science established, and we're like, oh, we need to regulate this.
Right.
And in some ways, I suppose that's the way of it. But I think I'm looking at the comments, and I see Ellen Green commenting about profitability. And I think in terms of guns, for instance,
Right.
that's something that's extremely profitable, right? That's one of the
Right.
reasons why it hasn't been regulated, is because people stand to make a lot of money. And
Absolutely.
I think we've seen this in terms of not in regulation, but in the way that we release vaccines or in the way that we release medicines, is that because medicines are so profitable, we don't see them shared in an equitable way, or a way that is really affordable for everyone. And so I don't know if I have an answer for how we adequately regulate technology as we move forward, but I do think that one of the things we should be doing as government is not putting profit first. We should be putting the people first, not just citizens, but the people who live in the land. We should be putting them first.
But isn't that tied to, isn't it problematic in a country that also wants to be capitalistic? Like
it is.
I mean,
of course it is. Yeah.
I think our problem ultimately, so many things tie completely back to that. We still believe this myth that capitalism works for everyone, that it makes it a better world, and it doesn't. It makes it a better place for a small percentage of the population and a much worse place for the rest of the population. And it affects our heads. We make decisions based on things other than facts.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
it's the way that a capitalistic society impacts us and influences us.
Yeah.
And I've always called it it could be me thinking. Like, I don't want you to ever hurt rich people. I wanted to make it as easy as possible, because one day that could be me. I could be the rich person.
That's right.
Because it's a capitalistic society. If I just work hard enough, which is one of the biggest lies, most folks who are millionaires came from families that were millionaires.
That's right.
It might have been true early in America's history, but today, I don't care how hard you work. It's very few people that will, no matter how hard they work, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Help me with this quote, Mark. I'm going to mess it up, but it's.
I'll try.
So the reason, so the quote goes like this. I can't remember who said it. The reason why the United States has remained a capitalist country instead of a socialist country is because instead of people seeing themselves as living in poverty, they see themselves as temporarily embarrassed millionaires.
Yes.
Right?
I did say that. I know who it is.
If you know, comment. If you're
I know
watching and
who
you
it.
know, comment.
I know who it is, and his name's not coming. We all know him. I think it's the guy that wrote the People's History of the United States, and I'm just Howard
Yeah.
Howard Zinn. I think it might have been
Yeah.
Howard Zinn that said that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a brilliant quote and so good. All right, I'll tell you what. We could go on and on about this. There's so many pieces of impact that this movie could have on theology and politics. But let's do this. Let's take another break, and after the break, we're going to ask each other questions that are unplanned and that hopefully will completely trip Caleb up.
Perfect.
Moonshine Jesus, nobody's sky. Moonshine Jesus, everybody alright. Moonshine Jesus, a surprising delight. Moonshine Jesus, won't you shine a light?
Welcome back to the Moonshine Jesus Show. Today we are talking about the Adam Project, and we have moved on into the Q&A part of our program. So if you have questions, go ahead and ask them. I do see we've got a commenter who confirmed, Mark, that it is Howard Zinn who said that quote that I could kind of remember, but couldn't remember.
You remember the quote a lot better than I would. Thanks to Wes Daniel for saying that. Also, Ellen Green has been great. Lots of comments coming through, lots of insightful stuff going on. I absolutely really appreciate folks like both of them.
It's great. It's great when we see comments. And so go ahead and write some questions if you get them. But I've got a question for you in the meantime, Mark. I'm curious, and I'm going to ask you this because we're talking about technology, we're talking about time travel, and I know that you're into this kind of stuff.
Oh,
and I know that you
might not want to ask me questions about time travel because I will geek out on you. I don't know.
Maybe I just want to ask you. Maybe I just want to say, like, what are your thoughts on time travel? No, but okay, maybe.
Can we tell you about how nobody gets it right in movies? No, okay, go ahead.
Nobody gets it right.
They don't.
So what really happens when you change the past? What's it really? No, okay. Here's what I want to know. Here's my real question.
Yeah, man.
Okay, I want to know as technology's advancing at this incredible rate. Is there a point at which technology needs to stop? Or is there a point at which we need to just say, whoa, this is getting out of control? Or is this a good thing? Is technology constantly advancing? Is that a good thing for humanity? What's your take on it?
Well, I'll answer in two parts.
Good.
First part is the first domino's already been tipped, so we're not stopping it. That is just how technological advances happen. But the second part is, yes, there are moments where we need to be better about recognizing when we need to stop advancing technology in areas. We're never going to stop technology overall. We are curious people. We want to understand how things work. We want to see if we can make them work better. We want to see if we can make them work in ways that help people. And unfortunately, there are those who want to see if they can make it in ways that hurt other people so that they get an advantage. So we're going to keep seeing that. But yes, we've got to learn the moral balance of where it becomes a negative to society, and it needs to stop there. And that's part of, I think, goes back to our conversation in the last segment about at what point does the government have to be regulating things that have negative impact for folks. So we can't stop it, but sometimes in areas we've got to be better at regulating it and almost stopping it if necessary. Yeah. What are your thoughts?
So I'm also a tech geek too, and I love technology. I hate antiquated technology, and I love embracing the next new thing. And so I'm with you. I think it's all about regulation, and I think it's about how we deal with it, how we use it. And I'm also reading in the comments, and I see reasons why people are drawn to stories about technology and time travel too. And I'm just lifting that up, that I think it's the human condition to be interested in thinking about what if. What
Right.
if is, I mean, I think we're better if we, that's one of the things I appreciate about Buddhism is
Yeah.
the thought about living in the moment and not what ifing ourselves to death. But I think it's human nature to wonder what if, and also to spend to think about spending time in the past,
Yeah.
and to be nostalgic about that. But I do appreciate the thought about living in the moment and thinking about the future.
Well, you
So,
just helped me out by saying that part
okay,
because
good. Oh, I'm
I
glad.
was trying to decide between two questions.
Okay.
Two questions I'm asking. One of them was why we're
Good.
so intrigued with time travel. So you've kind of done a little bit working on that. So
I knew it, Mark.
I know you traveled back and you saw me writing my notes.
That's right, I did.
But
I'm
you're
like,
not
I'm gonna go
sharing.
ahead and answer that.
Trying, like it says at the beginning of the Adam Project, time travel exists. You just don't know about it yet. You do, but the rest of us don't. Somehow you
That's
managed to
right.
do that.
I'm actually from the future.
I
We
have
just
no
don't know.
doubt that explains a lot. Actually, it really does. So listen, I've got a two-part question. The first
Oh,
part
okay.
is a very like overly symptomatic. It's we hear it all the time. It's almost a cliche, but this movie calls for it. What would you tell your younger self if you could travel back? Your 12-year-old self. What would you tell your 12-year-old self if you could? But this is a two-parter. I'm going to have a follow-up
Okay.
here.
Okay. I think I'd tell my 12-year-old self, just be true to who you are. It's like we were talking about earlier. I think at that and this is why I think so many time travel movies and pieces of literature have you going back to adolescence at the time when you're trying to figure out who you are,
Yeah.
because it's at that moment where you're really kind of unsure. Like, is who I'm becoming who I'm supposed to be?
Right.
Or am I supposed to be more like the people I'm around? Is it okay to be uniquely me? And I think telling my younger self, be who you are, just whoever it is, just be who you are. That's the best advice you can ever give anyone who is at that stage in life, to
Yeah.
just be true to themselves. And it's theological too,
Yeah.
uh just be yourself, embrace your diversity, embrace God's creation. i
Right.
i love that. That's why that's one of the most empowering things churches can tell you, is no matter what stage in life you are. I get people who come to church all the time who have said, I've been denying myself for 40 years and I'm
Yeah.
starting to come to terms with who I am. Is that okay? And the greatest gift I have as a pastor is to say, yes, be who you are, and uh,
Yeah.
and we'll rejoice in that.
I'm cruel, so I would go no. It's
No.
not. No, no. I would go no. It's not okay that it took 40
Okay.
years, but
Yeah.
yes, it is good that that's where you are now.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
That's
I
yeah.
just like that tension that allows you to build up first. So
Yeah. I like
all right.
it.
So here's the second part of the
Yeah.
question.
Okay.
So you go back, you visit your younger self.
Hmm.
If you could, would you tell your younger self, like we all make mistakes in life. Would
Sure.
you try to warn your younger self to not make certain mistakes that you made in your life?
I don't think so. So I mean, although
I
I
was
was
hoping that
like,
was your answer, but why?
although I was in the movie, I'm like, no, you got to tell your dad when he's gonna die. You got to, you got to tell him. You got to tell him so he can do something. But no, right, because it's those things, even the hardships, that make us who we are.
Yeah,
And so
that's
I don't think I would change. I don't think I would change things because um, I wouldn't be who I am, or I wouldn't have
yeah.
the things in my life that make me me. And that's the gift of life, is that some parts of it are wonderful, some parts of it are terrible,
Mhm.
and if you get through it, it's what makes you you.
It
So,
is.
what about you, Mark? Would you tell your
Oh, no,
past
for the
self?
exact same reason. Like,
Mm,
I have had way too many, there's been a lot of difficulties in my life, a lot of struggles, I mean, I've had There was a period in time where I had two very young kids, and there were nights where I didn't know if I could put food on the table for them.
Right.
Matter of fact, I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be able to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change any of it because it's exactly what you're saying. I learned from those experiences. Who I am now is directly connected and rooted in those experiences. And it also, it's unfortunate that the human condition is somewhat in the space that having lived in certain situations gives you more emotional connection and empathy with other folks who are struggling in those similar spaces. And
Yeah.
just doing what I do, as much as it was hurting and as much as it felt horrible, I now can recognize that while they still are horrible, terrible moments, there's nothing good about them.
Right.
I can bring something good out of them and make
Mm.
something better in the world because of those horrible moments. So no, I would not. Now we're going to close with one more question. I have
Yes.
to.
Oh.
We're running slightly
Okay.
long, but
Okay.
so
You got to
because
ask one. Okay.
I think that the ending of the movie needs to be addressed a little bit.
Okay.
So one of the subplots of the movie, it was the impetus of why it started, but it became a subplot of the movie, is that he was going back to find find the woman that he loved,
Right.
his wife, right? And
Yep.
ultimately, they have to make the decision to end the timeline that they meet in.
Right.
And he basically says, or she says, we are connected. We're going, we'll find each other in some way. So my question is, do you think, are people so destined for each other, so connected with each other, that no matter what you change in their storyline, that they'll always find each other in some way? Because ultimately that's where this movie ends, is the two of them not knowing each other still meet up in almost in the exact same way that they did the first time. I mean, we're both
Okay. There was a
we're
time
both
in my
married,
life.
so it could get you in really bad.
There's a time in my life when I was a real romantic, and I would have said, "Yeah,
Yep, yep,
we're gonna find each other." I I'm not so much a romantic anymore in that way, that I
right,
think that you're gonna wind up together either way. But I do think that had they not wound up together, they still could have found a way to been happy, right? Even without
sure.
each other.
Oh yeah,
And so yeah, it's a love story in a lot of ways, and it feels good. The ending wraps up nicely. In real life, I think it is that we choose. We choose our partners, and we choose. And at the end of the day, even when we've suffered through times that are very difficult, we have to we have to choose joy. Uh,
right.
and we have to choose. And so no, I don't really think that we're fated to be, and this is a progressive Christian value, right? That
Right,
that we're not fated to be any
right.
way. We're not predetermined. Calvin would hate this
Hey, you're
podcast.
talking to a Presbyterian
I
here. What?
know him.
No,
Calvin
I
would hate
completely,
it, but you know what? We're
not,
not predestined. We make
no,
our own
no,
destiny. We make our own choices. I know you're not a Calvinist, Mark. I
not
know you well
not
enough.
not in any way, and I completely agree with you.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah, yeah,
I was the same way. There was a
yeah.
time in my life where I kind of loved the idea that there was this kind of universal connection that could happen between
Hmm.
two people where they were
Yeah,
destined for each other, and it is a beautiful idea, and it is heartwarming, and I still want that to be true, but I look at
yeah.
life and
Sure.
see that that isn't the reality, and frankly, it leads to really bad relationships.
Yeah.
Because it means when you see the world that way, it's
Hmm.
too easy to fall into a relationship and just go, well, it was meant to be, so everything's going to be okay. And you know what? That's just not the
Mm.
truth. L- Love is commitment and work. We like to
Yeah.
think of it as some big flowery thing, and there's moments that it feels amazing and is brilliant. But true love, true marriage, true commitment in a relationship, whether it's marriage, whether it's just commitment to each other, however it works, is about choosing to be in the relationship, recognizing the best in a person, and
Yeah.
and being able to work and willing to work with them for the betterment of that relationship. And there's nothing universally, connecting about that. But in a lot of ways, how much more beautiful is that story, that there's someone who chooses to
Mm.
work to
Yeah.
be with you, to
Mm.
say, I am making this choice over and over again, no matter how hard it gets. But
Yeah.
outside of abuse, obviously,
Yeah.
but
Absolutely.
within
Yeah.
the regular struggles of relationship, to have that idea that not just we were destined to be together, blah blah blah, but to say we really appreciate parts of each other immensely, and we're
Yeah.
willing to do
To work.
whatever it takes
Yeah.
to work through
Hmm.
whatever happens so that we can keep being together in
Yeah.
that way. I mean,
You're
isn't
right.
that a
It's
lot more
beautiful.
powerful?
Much more powerful. It's just
Yeah.
like church. I mean, and the
Yeah.
world, whenever we don't say, hey, it's God's plan that we do things in a certain way.
Yeah.
And instead we say, you know what? Jesus was a great teacher about God who taught us how it is that we make the world a better place. And it is up to us to try to make that world a better place. That I think that that's incredibly powerful. And
Yeah.
so I'll end on that theological note, Mark.
I think that not is not only the perfect place for you to end, but the perfect place for this
Mm,
podcast to end. We
okay.
we thank you all for joining us,
Absolutely.
tuning in, whether you're
Yep.
watching live or listening back later, playback. We do encourage you, please, if you've enjoyed this, share it with other people. Let them know we're
Please.
out there, and
Hmm.
have them join us the next time. So, speaking of the next time, until the next time, cheers to you all.
Cheers. Mine's
And
gone.
we'll see you the next time on the Moonshine.
Jesus show.
Hey, hey.
Moonshine